how to assign CPU resources to Kubernetes or OpenShift containers and pod with Ansible. I'm going to show you a live demo and some simple Ansible code. I'm Luca Burton and welcome in today's episode of Ansible Pilot. Let's talk about Ansible module K8s. The full name is kubernetes.core.k8s, which means that it's part of a collection or module of Ansible to interact with Kubernetes and Red Hat OpenShift clusters. It manages Kubernetes K8s object. Parameter. There is a long list of parameters of a K8s module. Let me summarize the most useful for our use case. The name and namespace specify object name and object namespace. They are useful to create, delete, and discover an object without providing the full resource definition. The API_version parameter specify the Kubernetes API version default v1. The state, like other module, determine if an object should be created, present, updated, patched, or deleted, absent. The definition parameter allow you to provide the full Kubernetes YAML definition directly in the Ansible Playbook. Yeah, this is so powerful. Otherwise, you could specify one external file on the src parameter with definition of object or object that you would like to create or update. And that's it. Let's move on to a little demo about how to assign CPU resources to Kubernetes or OpenShift containers and pod with Ansible Playbook. Oh, are you excited? Let's move on. Let me explain the plan. First of all, I'm going to create a Kubernetes namespace with inside a pod running this container, the Vish stress. This is a simple CPU stress container that is become more famous, but there is not a lot of information under the Docker Hub. So I deep dive into the GitHub and I found that Vishkana was the original contributor, is a Google employee and created this stress test. Okay, so basically this is the Docker file. As you can see, it only ran this stress test and what is inside this file. Okay, this is a standard make file and main.go. We have all the utility. As you can see, this is a simple utility that read from dev0 and copy to dev null. Yes, these are the standard Linux charter. And it also burns some CPU and allocates some memory. So it's a great utility to do this type of testing. And as you can see on the main, it only loop around and consume some CPU cycle. Yeah, great stuff. So we are going to run this container in Kubernetes and see the result. Oh, we are going to set some limit, otherwise it burns all your CPUs. Welcome on my editor. I'm going to show you one simple Ansible playbook to assign CPU resources. First of all, let's begin our play with a name K8s CPU demo that is going to be executed on localhost, and let me disable also system information gathering with false. The connection between Ansible will be local, and let me define also a variable my project. This is the namespace name, in my case CPU-example. Two tasks. The first is to create the Kubernetes namespace So let me create, I prefer to add the full name, so my project namespace. This will be substituted with a project name on the runtime. Ansible module kubernetes.core.k8s, some parameter, the kind is a namespace, and the name of the object is my project. Here we go. We are going to substitute. No, not here. Ansible is going to do on the runtime. The state must be present. So if doesn't exist, is going to be created. API version v1, but this is the default. Is not mandatory. So create K8s pod with Ansible module Kubernetes core K8s. Again, some parameter. First is the state must be present, and now let's start with Kubernetes definition. So all this code is considered Kubernetes. Okay, API version v1, the kind is a pod, and now let's start some fun. So metadata with, for the pod name is CPU-demo, and also let me assign this to namespace my project. Here we go. And let's start the spec part. So the containers that we are going to start. So first of all, let's give it a name, CPU demo CTR, that is going to execute the image. Here we have a fun, the CPU stress, so vish/stress, and let's define the resources assigned. So first of all, the limit, the hard limit of the resources, that must be CPUs 1, only one CPU is assigned to this, but the request when the pod start is assigned only 0.5, so half of a CPU. Now I would like to specify also some argument from the command line that we need to pass to the container. So first is like dash CPUs, the number of CPU that this stress test is trying to allocate is a 2 CPU. Clearly there is a problem. The command inside is trying to use 2 CPU, but we defined an initial start of 0.5 and then maximum of 1. And now we are going to see which limit is matched by Kubernetes. As you can see, in less than 40 lines of code, I'm able to start up a full service with a namespace and a pod directly with Ansible Playbook. Isn't this magic? Welcome to my terminal. First of all, let's verify that no namespace beginning with CPU exists. So OC get namespace, and let me grab for CPU. We are expecting no result, and here we go. Everything is clean, so we could execute our Ansible Playbook under Kubernetes. No, this is not the one. Is assign CPU .yml. Here we go. The execution is super fast, and we get a change status, which means some operations were performed on the Kubernetes or OpenShift cluster. Let's verify with OC get namespace grab CPU. Oh, I did a typo. Namespace. Here we go. We have a CPU example namespace available, so now I could verify more details about this namespace, and was created 36 seconds ago, so everything is pretty fresh. Now we could enter in the namespace, so set as active OC project CPU-example, Oh yes, now I'm using this project and let me get the pods inside of it. As expected, CPU demo, there is one pod running on one age 100 seconds, so everything is pretty aligned with the time of running my Ansible Playbook code. What else we can do it? Well, we could verify more about the pod definition, so let's get pod demo about namespace equal CPU example. Yes, same result as before, but what else if we add some -- option to produce some YAML file? Yes, output in YAML format. Wow, we have more detail about everything. As you can see, there are all around this stuff, but I'm more interested about the spec definition that define the amount of the argument, CPUs and the resources, limit and request is perfect aligned what we were expecting. The request here is in millisecond, but everything is okay. If you have a Kubernetes, you can have also the top of this container of this pod, but OpenShift doesn't have the metrics package installed. So that's it. We defined the limit of a CPU for our pod, and everything is sorted out. Let me show you via the OpenShift cluster console. First of all, let me connect. I'm using my Kube admin user, and from the main dashboard, let me switch to the project namespace CPU example. Here we go. As expected, we have one pod available, CPU demo. Yes, completely running, and everything seems in the right place. So let's take a look on the metrics. Oh damn it, unfortunately it's not available. We're expecting like a high CPU usage, and in the YAML definition, let's double check that the limits are set to 1 CPU and request to 500 milliseconds. Here everything seems perfect. Environment we set nothing. And what else? Oh, we can take a look on the logs. Here we have main.go running. Yeah, exactly the utility from GitHub. Do you remember? Yes, the other things is empty. So basically we were able to spin up a CPU bound process with Ansible. Now you know how to assign CPU resources to Kubernetes or OpenShift containers and pod with Ansible. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, keep in touch with me. See us on the next adventure of Ansible Pilot, and have a great day. See ya! This video is part of our Ansible automation program. Sign up today on www.ansiblepilot.com for uninterrupted exclusive video and so much fun.